Rooibos Mead.
Readings, racking, and bottling.
Should be bottling. Okay, so this has been sitting for about 6 weeks now. We actually haven't touched it at all. It did get some kind of funky stuff going on up there. It was a little weird looking at first, but now I'm just curious how it's doing. As you can see in this little inset video, the airlock is still active. There's still bubbles coming up the side. This is still actively fermenting, even after 6 weeks. This just goes to show you that you really can't know how long a ferment's going to take.
Lots of times we say don't judge the doneness of a brew by activity in the airlock, because activity in the airlock is just telling you something at some point happened.
Or is happening now.
Which is a good thing. But, as Brian said, you can see these little tiny bubbles that are going up the side and creating a little tiny foam line. And that is normally
an indicator,
a sign that fermentation is still occurring.
So I don't expect this to be done. But I want to see how far it's come. We might even take a tiny taste. Just because I like to.
Now, because this is a mead based with tea, sometimes little particles of the tea itself can get stuck up in the neck, and they might start to discolor and look a little funky. If that occurs in your brew, do the swirl method that Brian likes to say and just swirl it all in there and let it get absorbed by the yeasts that are doing their thing. If you start to see a discoloration floating on the top again after the swirling process, you may have an issue, but not 100%. So we like to let people know that some things can look a little off. Swirling it and letting it get reintegrated, if it goes away, then it wasn't an issue to worry about. If it comes back, then it might be an issue.
So right now it's sitting at 1.058. The fact that there's still bubbles coming up means this is nowhere near done yet, but I would actually like to taste it. I really like Rooibos tea, so I want to know what this tastes like. All right, I just poured off a little sample. I'm going to pour the rest right back in here. There's no worries because everything was sanitized in.
The red bucket of sanitization!
So let's actually, before we taste this, let's put the airlock and everything right back on. Okay, so when we put the airlock back on, for some reason the bung just didn't want to stay in. Sometimes if they're a little wet, that kind of thing, they don't like to stick. So your handy dandy rubber band works wonderfully. But anyway, here we have our sample. And as you can see, it's pretty cloudy. Not really all that surprising. This is still young and it's still working. There's tons of yeast in suspension in there. Smelling. If you watched our nettle mead video, this is reminiscent of that to me. A little bit more honey smell than the nettle mead had, but definitely smells like tea or herbs.
It has that
earthy, grassy,
yet astringent
almost, yeah,
thing going on that tea sometimes has.
And I know I'm saying Rooibos, because that's how I say it. A million people are going to try to correct me on how to say it. I've been saying it that way for like 30 years, so I can't change.
He's doing the poker face again. Darn it.
Okay. On entrance, I get this tea sweetness, the Rooibos tea with honey sweetness, like if I drank a hot cup of that. And as it goes down, it's a little bit more astringent. And it gets a little more bitter and more bitter. When you get to the finish, it's just bitter. I'm hoping that will age out, but it's not bad. That's what I want to be clear on.
It's still certainly Rooibos, though.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting because I didn't know what to expect. I don't hate it. I really don't. And even this young and still going, I don't hate it.
I couldn't even see this.
I just got fruity on the front.
Heated once it's done.
Oh, as a mold mead?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this is really interesting. Really awesome to see what this does. And we're going to let this sit for a while and take another reading because this is still going. So it's probably going to be at least a month before we take another reading. I may just make a community update saying, hey, the Rooibos Mead is still going, just so you guys are aware. Because we know our new system of trying to do the checking and the racking and the bottling all in one is confusing some people.
It's
A lot of people
making a longer wait for you.
yeah, and people are asking, like, what's going on with this? How come you haven't filmed it? Well, we have. We just haven't shown it yet because we don't want to show you little tiny bits and pieces. We're trying to make it simpler because what was happening is people were not finding the third part of 7 or, 7 of 9 or stuff like that. It just got so confusing. So we're trying to make much less parts to each brew set. And that way it's, you got to find 2 videos instead of 12.
So we'll see you when it's time for the next reading.
All right, it's been almost 4 weeks since we looked at this, and we're just going to test its gravity one more time to make sure it is finished. When last we looked, it was 1.058, and I didn't think it was finished. This time, it might be. It's floating. Looks like 1.056, so it didn't go much further. That's a little bit troubling. It means it may have stalled. Let me do a quick calculation to find out what the actual ABV of this is. Well, that's rather disappointing. It's at 7.56% ABV, but it did stop. Now, this was Lalvin 71B. It usually goes to 15 or 16%, so I'm a little bit concerned about this. However, we're going to try something. We're going to rack it anyway, even though it's not done. I want to see if this continues even after we rack it. It's been pretty non-active for quite a while, so I'm curious. And, well, let's taste it first before I say too much more. It smells like Rooibos tea. When we tasted this last time, it was interesting, it was different, and we didn't hate it, was the words I think I used.
It does smell like Rooibos tea, but there's something else, and if I wasn't told this was fermented, I wouldn't be able to put my finger exactly on what that something else is.
Now that's interesting. The mystery continues.
You can definitely tell the residual honey is there.
Yeah, it's a little overly sweet for me. Okay, we're going to change our plans. I don't think we're going to be racking this. Not quite sure what to do here. I am going to dump this right back in, though.
Does it need to be degassed, maybe?
I am going to add a little Ferment O. That might help.
Dun, dun, dun!
And I'm actually thinking maybe even a little bit more yeast, because for whatever reason the yeast that's in here isn't doing anything. If I imagine really hard, I think I might see little bubbles coming up, but I'm not so sure. It's just going way too slow at this point because this was started...
Yeah, I see little bubbles.
There is, but this was started back in July. So it's August, September. This is 2 months old. It should be much further along than it is. So let's add some Ferment O and go from there. All right, so you might be wondering, why Ferment O? Well, because it is actually a yeast nutrient, and there might be a nitrogen deficiency in here. There could be a lot of things going on. It's weird because it's tea, though. Tea tends to have a lot of stuff, and there was, 32 teaspoons of tea, dried tea, that went into this. So I'm not really sure. Derica mentioned maybe taking a pH reading, and if this doesn't work, if it doesn't start up again, that's a valid option. That's definitely something we can consider doing. I don't think it's necessary at this point because I can't see tea being that acidic. So I don't think acidity is really the problem. I'm just going to use half teaspoon of Ferment O and dump it in. If you don't have Ferment O, you can use yeast hulls. You can add, you can boil up some yeast and throw it in there. I don't really like to use anything that isn't natural. Like I don't really want to throw in some of the other chemical style nutrients. It's just not my thing. If this doesn't start up again, well, you know what? We'll deal with it then. Figure it out. So I'm just going to put the stopper and the airlock back on this and give this a good swirl to mix that through. So I'm just going to put my thumb over the hole and give this a good shake. Now, before anybody freaks out that I just added oxygen, no, I didn't. it had to degas. There was a lot of CO2 in there, which is actually surprising given how much time this has been sitting. So that those little bubbles I saw might have just been CO2 in solution coming out. But we also could be reactivating these yeast. Maybe they were sitting in too much CO2, they weren't happy with their situation. Adding that little bit of extra nutrient to it with the amount of sugars that are still in there might just be enough to get it going once again. So I'm actually going to degas this a little bit better because that's a lot of gas. I did not think it had that much in it. That's kind of crazy. Usually by this point they don't have that much. So I'm thinking that could be the culprit.
Yeah.
Because that's significant. All right, so now I'm just gonna put the airlock back on this, let this sit for a while and think about what it's done, or hopefully think about what it's about to do. And we'll be back in a little while, probably a few weeks, with an update.
Rooibos Mead.
Is it done yet? All right, so we started this July 21st, and today is October 28th, which means this is like 13 to 14 weeks old. We racked it once already. We took a reading. And then last time it was a little bit high still, so we added some ferment to it to see if maybe it would go a little bit further. I don't really think it fermented much more. But you know what? There's only one way to find out. And that one way to find out is with the hydrometer reading. So I'm just going to take a hydrometer reading right now. And yes, it's very important to take hydrometer readings. A lot of people think it's just so that you know about how much alcohol you're making. Not really. That's a good thing to know, but it's not the only reason. The real reason is just like right now to know, is this done? Is it safe to bottle? I think we're floating. All right, we are floating, which simply means that the hydrometer is not resting on the bottom. Because if it's on the bottom, I'm not getting an accurate reading, right? It's got to be floating, right? You know that, right? You'd be surprised. I get questions. I don't mean to belittle people either with that.
No.
That's not what I'm about. It's just we get some pretty funny questions. 1.054. Okay, it went down 2 points. I don't think it's going to go down anymore since the last time we checked it was a month ago. So it went down by 2 points. Anyway, so that's 1.054. Before I even calculate the alcohol of this, let's just take a taste test. That's what we're going to do. Just to see, is there anything that we would do to alter this? First off, I'd like to point out the color. It's like this gorgeous tea honey color, which is what you'd expect since it's, you know, rooibos and honey. But I really appreciate the color of that.
Yeah.
Very nice. It smells very tea, like rooibos. You know, what you'd expect. While she takes a sip, I'm going to put this into the pitcher. Because I'll knock it over. I just know it.
It almost has, on the scent, like almost a boucher note.
Yeah, that's the rooibos. It has this interesting, almost caramelized or roasted flavor. The smell, I get a little bit of the youngness, even though this is almost 3 months old, or over 3 months old. I still get a little bit of young, like green. She likes it. Oh, wow.
It tastes like a delightful cup of rooibos tea with some honey in it.
Really, really good. Here you go, babe. Finish it off. We're going to do a tasting on this soon, but wow, that's good. I mean, right off the bat, far, far superior to what it was when we first tasted it, because I remember going, and I like rooibos tea. And I like rooibos tea with honey, and I like rooibos tea with sugar. So I would have thought I'd really like this. And I do. This is really good. I'm very impressed. We still have lots of rooibos tea too. Anyway, so what we want to do is rack this. Now there is a pile of goop in the bottom of here. It's called lees or lees, depending on how you want to pronounce it. People have been telling me that I say it wrong. It's not a rental agreement. Somebody said. Okay, that's how I learned to say it. That's how I say it. I say caramel too, but you know, whatever. But there's stuff at the bottom of here. So we're going to rack this into a pitcher first and try to avoid some of that. And that way I can keep blabbering at you while we're bottling it. and not worry about picking up all that stuff. All right, so we did our reading, and I calculated the alcohol. It's a little bit disappointing. It's actually only 7.8%. That's kind of low for 71B, and the only thing I can figure is maybe that tea has some antimicrobial properties that is preventing it from letting it ferment more. That's the best I can figure, because it wasn't even a high starting gravity. But you know what? I don't care. It tastes really good. So we're going to rack this.
And we're not going to blame the beast for this, because the beast has been mighty beastly recently.
Oh, yeah, I think it's just making up for a couple.
Yeah.
We had one that went to 18%, another one 17%. So I think the yeast that we have just kind of went, oh, whoa, wait, we went overboard with those. So we're going to go lower with these.
You want your cap?
Yeah, I want the cap. I want cheesy poof.
I
Okay,
knew that was coming.
putting the cap on because there's a lot of goop in the bottom here, like we mentioned before. Just going to put that in there, and the other end needs to go in the pitcher.
Yeah, I got bottles.
This hose is entirely too long. That is my story, and I'm sticking to it. We got a new auto siphon, and it's a 6-foot hose. I got to cut that sucker down. It's ridiculous. Nobody needs a 6-foot hose. All right, siphoning. Not the most exciting television. Therefore, we'll see you when we're done. All right, and as always, when we're bottling, we like to add the bottling wand, which has the little springy thing at the end. When it pushes down, that's the liquid flow. Let go, comes out.
We've also removed the cap from the end of our auto siphon because we've already racked, and so we know there's no sludge in there.
I'm just going to put this all the way at the bottom of the bottle and hold it down.
Give that to you.
And then I'm going to hand it off to Derica. And we're going to mangle this mess of hose. And I'm going to get this started. And just like racking, it's kind of boring to watch. So we're just going to finish bottling these off and we'll be back. So this is kind of one of those wah, wah, wah moments. Look at this. That's not even enough to do a tasting on. But, you know, we'll probably just drink that. But anyway, one of these will go away for a year. Probably not the green bottle, because I just don't like that bottle. We used it only because we ran out of these. So this one we might just drink like sooner. One of them will go away for a year. One of them is going to be our actual official tasting that you'll see in probably a couple of days. And then the other one, who knows? Might let it sit for a little while. Don't really know. But overall, we're very, very, very happy with this brew. And I'm thinking of a couple ways that we might be able to improve it for next time and try this again, most definitely. If you like this video, look up. There's another one. Go watch it.